And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to I've Got Something to Say. My name is Mark Stevenson, and I'm so privileged to be before you today to give you some vital information. So I want you to grab your pen and paper. You're going to be getting some vital information. Make sure that you take a look at the numbers and information that you're going to see right here at the bottom of the screen. And you can call us back or you can give us emails, and we'll make sure that we get back with you. Now, today, we're going to be giving it to you in the raw. We're going to be talking about women in prison. And you may not know this, but the greatest growing population, the fastest growing population of people in prison today are the women, in particular the African American women. Black women are really going into the prison system at a rate of 19 to 1 as opposed to 150 to 1 for their Caucasian counterparts. Now, I want to give you some data right now. Take a look at this on the screen. We're looking at the number of incarcerated women from 1980 to 2010. And on your screen, you are looking at this bar graph, and it clearly shows that the number of women in prison, they increased actually by 646% between 1980 and 2010. That's from 15,000 to 112,000 people, females in jail. Now, let's get into this a little bit more in detail. Because as of 2010, more than 1 million women were under the supervision of the criminal justice system. In prison, some 112,000 women were in jail. 93,000, in prison was 112,000. In the local jails was 93,300. On probation, 712,000 individuals, and on parole, some 103,000 individual females. How did that compare with the rates for African American women versus the other races? 1 in 19 for black women, 1 in 45 for Hispanic, and 1 in 118 for white women. Overall, if you take the numbers from 1 in 19 for African American women, as opposed to all the others, you're talking about in opposition of 1 in 150. So the African American female has become a commodity. Ladies and gentlemen, today I have on our show an individual that's just returned home to us. And we're going to get into her story. We were so grateful that she is on the air with us today to share her story with us so that it doesn't happen to many others. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce to you Tania Jones. Welcome to today's show.
Thank you for having me.
I really appreciate you taking the time to come out and spend with us so that we can find out what happened to you and how we can stop this from happening to others. Tania, we understand that you just came home, but how long were you gone?
I was gone for a total of 6 months.
6 months?
Yes.
6 months, I understand, that just totally changed your life. What did you go to jail for?
I went to jail for driving on a revoked license.
What?
Yes, and actually fleeing and eluding from the police.
Wait a minute. You tried to play Grand Theft Auto, did you?
Well, not quite, but
what happened?
Basically, I've never had a license. So about 7 years ago, I received a DUI, and I had never had a license before.
How old are you?
I'm 29.
And you never had a license?
No,
but you're driving every day?
You're right.
Okay, go ahead.
So with me getting a DUI, basically they gave me a license to revoke it. So I never actually had a license, but in the system I have a revoked license. I have been arrested, unfortunately, 2 other times for driving on a suspended license. So this time in particular, when I was pulled over, I was scared and I pulled off, and which led me to the fleeing and eluding case, which made it even worse than it should have been.
Well, you mentioned that you were fleeing from them. What happened did you have any guns on you or drugs? Why did you feel like you needed to run?
To be honest, I thought without a conscience, is which you will do sometimes in that circumstance. I knew I was in the wrong, and to be honest, I shouldn't have been driving, and I was scared. In my mind, I thought I could get away, but you can't outrun the police, and I definitely made the situation a lot worse than it should have been.
So then fast forward, you get to jail. What happens there, and what happens in front of the judge? Couldn't you post bond?
Well, I wasn't in a situation to be able to bond out because unfortunately, I was already on probation for driving on a suspended license.
Wow, so you were on probation already for driving. You didn't learn the first time when they put you on probation. And so now you're going to still drive again. And what happened when you got in front of the judge?
Basically, I was used to being able to do a month or two and just being able to go home. So the realization of going to the penitentiary was very scary. I did have a private lawyer, but it didn't get me out of the consequences of my actions. And they wanted to send me to the penitentiary for 2 years, but I was sentenced to 1 year. Which you do 50% of that, which led me down to 6 months.
Now, did you stay in Cook County Jail during all of this time?
No, once sentenced to my time, I was actually sentenced to the penitentiary, which was Logan Correctional Facility.
Where Logan? I've never heard of them.
Yeah, it's in Logan, Illinois. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere, to be honest with you. About 2.5 hours away from here.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we know that if you've just joined us, by the way, my name is Mark Stevenson, and seated next to me is Tania Jones. She's sharing her story of her going to jail, and we're going to find out how this could affect every family. Speaking of the family, what did this do to your family? I mean, you mentioned that you had an attorney, and so you didn't have to have public defender. We've heard stories about public defenders just not caring and giving you up to go to jail, but it seems like a private attorney, first of all, would have been able to help you.
Yes, in the beginning, I did have a public defender, and just to give you an example of having a public defender, I remember going to court on July the 28th, and I was given a continuance of September the 2nd. And I couldn't believe they had entirely skipped the month of August. So, I did have a friend that was able to help, and, he's also my mentor as well. So I was very appreciative of having a lawyer, but there are lots of people who don't have that opportunity to have a private lawyer. And when you're faced with just the public defender, to be honest, I mean, they really don't give you many options. I mean, it's kind of like, option A or option B, and B is worse than A, so.
Well, what did this do to your family? I mean, we always hear the stories about people going away for multiple years, and you were away for 6 months. But how did this incident affect your family?
Well, it affects your family in my eyes. When we go to jail, it's kind of like our family goes to jail with us because they're left to take care of our business, take care of our responsibilities. In my case, I had a dog left behind. I left behind bills that my mother had to take care of. So, it's a kind of a selfish act as well because my mother was under a lot of emotional stress. She's 70 years old, and many nights she told me that she cried, and I didn't realize that my actions had affected her as much as it did, to be honest with you.
What happened to your car?
I lost the car, which, I had just gotten a couple of months prior to this incident. And now it's a $15,000 debt on the credit, which, affects you in the long run as well.
And you mean now your credit score is affected as well. So
Yeah.
how do you think that this is affecting your ability to become employed?
Well, the mindset of when you go to jail, you do have an X on your back, but it depends on the mindset that you're in, to be honest with you, because I was never discouraged. Although I was in a bad situation, I always encouraged myself, and I've always had an entrepreneur spirit. And with that entrepreneur spirit, even though I was in a bad situation, I always knew that everything would be okay. And if no one else ever hired me, I would start a business and be successful and be able to contribute to society and actually hire other people who were in the same situation as me.
You know, for sure, we're glad to hear this because, you know, ladies and gentlemen, I always tell you, I don't care who knows where I've been, as long as I never forget it. Yes, I'm an ex-offender too. Yeah, I got an X on my back here somewhere, and the fact is that I have to make sure that I am self-employed, that I'm able to take care of myself and my family, and I see that Miss Jones here is experiencing the same thing when she mentions having a mindset of an entrepreneur. What makes that so different from a person that's just seeking a 9-to-5?
Well, to be honest with you, you have to have that entrepreneur spirit in you because you'll be trapped inside of the box of just, you know, empowering someone else's company versus financially free. I mean, to be honest, when you work a job, you're kind of living paycheck to paycheck. And when you have that entrepreneur spirit, you want to be your own boss and you want to contribute as far as being able to have a successful business and then turning around and be able to help others around you that was maybe in the same situation as you.
So what did you do to start your own business?
Well, pretty much I've always had a passion for cleaning. So I wanted to make my passion a reality. And I realized that, you know, if you dream it, you can achieve it, basically. And I pitched it to my mentor, and basically, you know, Will was excited to hear that I was as ambitious as I was, and, you know, he agreed to fund my dreams. Now, and everyone's not always fortunate to have someone that will fund your dreams and things like that. But when you're passionate about something, someone will see your passion and they'll believe in you and they will give you a chance. They will give you a shot. But first, you have to believe in yourself, to be honest with you.
What do you do to surround yourself with people who you want to be like? Well, what is the networking process to you?
Well, you want to definitely surround yourself around like-minded people, entrepreneur-minded people, because if you surround yourself around people that are just seeking a job, you might fall into that mentality, to be honest with you. But when you surround yourself around people that are doing great things in life, they can be an example of where you want to go. And successful people always have really good advice to give you. So surrounding yourself around those people is always beneficial.
Now let's go back to jail if we can.
Okay.
Because I want to talk about the experience that you had in jail. Because we have some viewers out here that have children, nieces, and nephews that are on their way to jail as well, and our parents and uncles and aunts and grandmas, they don't know how to help. But I want to talk about what you experienced when you realized that you were going to be locked down for a while, and what happened to you when you went into jail. Who were you around? What kind of people?
Well, when you go to a place like that, I mean, although I was in there for something as minor as driving, you know, there are murderers, killers, baby harmers, and so forth in there. So, I mean, it's a very scary environment, and you're in there with people who, honestly, some people don't care. You know, they're never leaving, and to be in that atmosphere was very, very scary. When you first actually get to prison, because I had never been before, you're actually locked in your room 24 hours a day. 24
hours, oh my goodness.
You're allowed to shower every other day. So just the experience alone was a shell shock. And I was fortunate to have a roommate who, she had never been to jail either, but she actually was an entrepreneur. She owned a cleaning service.
Really?
And, but our spirits were a lot different. She contemplated suicide a lot on many days. And the thought of being in jail, everything that she had worked for, she was at the age of 43, she was at the point of losing everything. Who's going to pay her mortgage? Who's going to pay your property taxes? Who's going to look over your car, your insurance, and things like that? So, you know, going to jail, you can literally lose everything off one mistake.
Did you have a boyfriend at the time or something? Or I mean, you're talking about losing everything. Did you have a relationship?
At the time, I didn't have a boyfriend. I have more so a girlfriend than a boyfriend, but I wasn't in any relationship at all.
I see. Okay. Well, then let's be frank about it and keep it real. They always talk about among men about sex in jail and,
Okay.
and all of the many things that happen from a female's point of view. What will happen to our young sisters that get locked up? What kind of sex is happening in jail?
Well, I mean, as far as the sex, you know, it's not what you see on TV as far as if you drop the soap, someone's going to get you. But a lot of women, to be honest, they come to jail and, you know, they're used to having their husbands or in a relationship. And I've seen a lot of women come to jail and, you know, they wasn't necessarily with a woman in the beginning, but they missed that companionship part. And
Companionship.
yeah, and they will get in a relationship with a woman and, you know, they'll talks of, you know, lots of different sexual acts, but you got to be careful with that in the penitentiary, only because I've seen people get caught in a sexual. You could go down there for like 61 days and catch a 1-year sentence across the board for being caught in a sexual act with another woman.
Really?
And come home 1 year later.
Let me read something to you, and this is from the same sentencing project. You can find this, ladies and gentlemen, on www.sentencingproject.org. These statistics are real. These statistics talk about women in prison. Some 59% are more likely than men, 43%, to have a chronic and are communicable medical problems, including HIV, hepatitis C, and sexually transmitted diseases. 59% for the women that are going in there. Nearly 3/4, that's 73% of women in state prisons in 2004 had symptoms of a current mental health problem, compared to some 55% of men. Did you see mental health issues while you were there?
Definitely. In the facility, what they would have what you call Medline in the daytime and Medline in the evening, and a lot of these people are on different prescription drugs, you know, whether it be drugs to help you sleep, anxiety, and they had real issues. And you know, it was crazy because some people would actually like not take their medication, and you would see it affect them on, you know, a very serious note. Whereas I've seen girls that were into like fighting each other and things like that, and the medication kind of slowed them down, and you know, I guess to that degree, but they definitely had some issues, and medication plays a big role, even in the Cook County Jail. A lot of the ladies are on the prescription drugs to deal with those issues.
Psychotropic medications are just a part of the prison life.
It really is.
There's also, I know that you've probably talked with many of the women that had children, and you and I talked before the show about women that have children and then ended up in trouble for maybe carrying drugs or taking a rap for their boyfriends or whatever. According to this sentencing project, the research that was done on the sentencingproject.org website, they say that some 64% of the mothers in state prison lived with their children before being incarcerated versus 47% for the men. What did you hear about women and the regret that they had in losing their children, and what happened to their children?
Well, that was probably a very big issue for people with children. I wasn't able to relate to them as much because their heartache and pain that they had from being away from their children was the biggest part of their sentence. It wasn't even the fact that they were in jail, but they were, you know, mostly affected because they were away from their children. And I couldn't relate because I didn't have children, but many days their tears were not for themselves, but for the fact that they wasn't around their children. And, you know, you leave, and that's where the parents are affected, because 9 times out of 10, you know, the mother or the grandmother has the children.
Now, Ms. Jones, I can tell that you are an educated woman, and I know you asked yourself many times what the heck happened to me that made me make that faulty decision to get myself locked up. But I'm just wondering if you were able to talk to some of our viewers directly, and you are talking directly to our viewers, what would you say to get them to change their mind? Speak to the young women who are listening to you right now.
What I would say, it's all about cause and effect. And the causes we put out, those effects will come around. And in my case, it was driving without a license. But in your case, it could be drinking and driving, or just being around the wrong people at the wrong time. This message also goes out to the parents, to be honest with you, because it was many of times my mother is letting me drive her car knowing I don't have a valid license.
What is that called?
Which is called enabling.
Enabling. Oh.
Yeah, and if you want to be a part of the difference, if you know your child doesn't have a license, don't allow them to drive the car. Don't enable that bad behavior, because one mistake can literally cause a lot of damage in your life.
And it took all of those years of you being enabled to break the law, that you must have not have really cared much at all.
Well, it wasn't that I didn't care. I mean, when you're driving, you feel like you can get away with it, or you feel like you're not going to get caught. So that was my mindset, that I wouldn't get caught. And when I actually did, I made the even dumber decision of trying to get away, which, as I've said earlier, made my situation a lot worse.
You probably felt that you weren't as bad as some of the other ladies that you might know who are involved with drugs, or men having guns illegally and so forth. You probably felt that I'm just driving a car, so it's not really that bad after all. But what did you say when you ended up in jail with the 1-year sentence?
Well, at that point, I mean, it doesn't matter what your background is, your education level. I mean, you all are in one. And what we all had in common is that we broke the law. Okay. And when you break the law and you put those causes out, those effects are coming.
Now, let's fast forward. You are back at home. What are the things that you're doing in the community to help the process to be a contributor to society? What are you doing?
Well, at this point, I actually joined the campaign, the Jesus Chuy Garcia campaign. I was very excited about that. And basically, I wanted to be a part of change. I remember being in the penitentiary and looking at the news and seeing everything happening and going on. And I felt like I wanted to be a part of change. So that was actually one of the first things that I did upon coming home. I joined the campaign to make a difference, and once the difference was made, I wanted to be rewarded with the idea that I was a part of the difference.
That makes a lot of sense. You know, what about your ability to vote? You know that in the state of Illinois, we're one of the 14 states. There are 36 states that an ex-offender, and you are a convicted felon now,
Yeah.
There are 14 states that you can vote in, and you're lucky to be in the state of Illinois. Do you know that you can vote?
Okay, I was under the assumption that if you had a felony, you couldn't vote in Illinois.
That is completely wrong. They told me the same thing on my way back to the sidewalks of freedom. They told me don't bother voting, but it's not true. In the state of Illinois, you can vote. Don't anyone tell you that you cannot vote, because you can vote. And in 14 states in the United States, is just the beginning. We're going to change the law nationwide, because once you've served your time, you should deserve the right to vote and be able to choose your decision makers, which are our politicians.
That's a myth that I was under the assumption of, to be honest. I'm just knowing that I can vote literally as of right now.
Well, not only are you working on a political campaign, but you better make sure that you're registered now so that you can get out there and vote also.
I will.
Now, we only have a few minutes left here. If there were anything that you can tell our parents, our grandparents, aunties and uncles, and those individuals who might not believe you They might not believe that what we call fat meat is greasy.
Okay.
What would you tell them in order to make sure that they don't end up in the same way that you did?
Well, what I would say is the law is the law, and be careful of the causes that you put out. Only because to every cause there's an effect, and be careful of the things that you do that you think you're going to get away with, because you're not really getting away with it at all. And it can affect your entire life, your family's life, your children's life, and even your future, literally. So you want to always make the right decisions, even if you're not making the right decision right now. Plan to make the right decision tomorrow, because going to jail is not a pretty thing. And I did have a mugshot that I was gonna agree to let be on the air, but I'm still not sure. But I'm only telling my story so that I can be an example of what not to do and to try to make good decisions. No one is perfect, but the decisions that we make affect our lives, and it affects our future. So I was fortunate to be in a position to get my life back on the right track. And good thing for you is you're not in jail if you're watching this, so you can make good decisions. You don't have to do what I did.
That is amazing that you are being so giving and so open with the struggles that you've had. We want to thank you again. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have just joined us recently in this show, you really heard a good one. My name is Mark Stevenson, and seated next to me is Tania Jones. She has been so gracious to share her story with us. And we want to make sure that on this show, I've got something to say, that you have the opportunity now yourself to make a difference, because you have some information. Make sure you get out and vote. Make sure you register to vote. Whether you're an ex-offender or not, it is your responsibility, not just your privilege. Thank you so much for joining us. I cannot thank you enough. Tania Jones, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Very good.